Hi YouTube, this is VidHead85 and this is going to be a pretty long video because I'm going to summarize as much as I can while trying to maintain as much pertinent information as possible of the Star Trek films. Now, personally, the first one and the fifth one were pretty interesting. Those were the ones that I was not quite a fan of, but what I did like in Part 5 was the equine kind of thing and the whole cowboy thing and the Bill Shatner in his own element. The fifth one, rather, the search for God or something. The first one was the motion picture, which was often called the motionless picture. Monochrome pajamas. Spock looks like Darth Vader when he comes onto the Enterprise, and something is looking for a creator. Takes Ilia. She shaved her head for the role, and I believe she was one of the women that tried to spearhead Star Trek Phase 2, and that never became a reality, so they cast her in the movie. And when you read I Am Spock, you'll definitely get some of the more background information, and it is such a great read, and you'll definitely feel like you watched the movies before you've watched the movies if you've never seen a Star Trek movie. Stephen Collins takes the role of the creator to be with Ilia at the end of the movie, and that's a pretty interesting one. I tried to follow it, but it's interesting in the fact that it's confusing, if you ask me. But Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan was amazing. It was a great reboot. They watched some of the original series so that they can come back with a movie that was worthy of the Star Trek title, and they did with Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan. Now, after Khan was marooned on Ceti Alpha 5 at the end of Space Seed, Ceti Alpha 6 explodes, leaving Ceti Alpha 5 as a desert wasteland, and after finding some life on the planet, Captain Terrell and Commander Chekhov of the Reliant go down and they find Khan. The planet was to be lifeless in order to give life, aka Genesis, to a dead planet and terraform it and make it fit for life. Now, Khan finds out about this through the mind control that he does on Terrell and Chekhov, and intercepts Kirk and the Enterprise on the way to Space Station Regular 1. Now, they are the only ones in the quadrant, so they had to go there. After a brief skirmish with the Enterprise battered, they continue to Regular 1 to find most of the individuals murdered, and the database is wiped clean to avoid any information being obtained without proper authorization. Now, when Captain Terrell of the Reliant tries to kill Kirk, he turns the gun on himself. Now, Khan takes Genesis right after that, and a heated battle of words happen where Khan says, I've done more than kill you. I've hurt you. And Kirk, you bloodsucker, if you want to kill me, you're going to have to do it yourself. If you want to kill me, you have to come down here. And Khan is like, I've done more than kill you. I've hurt you, and I want to keep hurting you. And he reveals that he left the crew of Reliant on Ceti Alpha 5 buried alive. And then Khan, the best line out of the whole movie. So round 2 happens in a nebula where neither of them can see each other. Their sensors can't pick up each other, and their screens are all like filled with snow like a TV. But Kirk prevails in the battle, but Khan won't let him get away so quickly and detonates the Genesis device with his last breath. And that's when Spock springs into action and he saves the ship, costing him his life. Spock has finally taken the Kobayashi Maru test that was given in the beginning of the film, and a somber farewell is given to Spock, which is also a known part. Of all the souls I'd met in my travels, his was the most human. So then that gives way to Star Trek III, the search for Spock. Now, after Spock is left on the Genesis planet, there was one thing that wasn't. His Katra. His Katra was left in McCoy after he did the mind meld on McCoy before going into the chamber to remove the radiation. After a series of events, Mark Leonard, who plays Spock's father, Sarek, says, "Why did you leave him? You must go back and unite his body with his mind." Kirk and company are barred from going back to the Genesis planet, but Sulu ends up tying a guard who's holding McCoy in a cell after asking to be brought to the Genesis planet. Uhura tells Mr. Adventure to lock himself in a closet and pulls a phaser out on him, which is a great scene because you hardly ever see her much, taking such control in the series. And actually, In Living Color did an awesome spoof on it where she's like, "I'm sick and tired of sitting here with this thing in my ear." But you have to see that. Now, Scotty, now on board the Excelsior as a engineer, he calls it a bucket of bolts and decides to drain the transwarp drive to stop it from pursuing the Enterprise as McCoy, Sulu, Chekhov, and Kirk whisk themselves off to Vulcan, or actually, excuse me, to Genesis, while Uhura goes separately to Vulcan to prepare everything. Now, meanwhile, the Klingons have finally have gotten a hold of the Genesis, of the information for Genesis, and they are commanded by Commander Cruz, who was played by Christopher Lloyd, which I believe kind of wasn't exactly a mistake, but they wanted Edward James Olmos, and he was really robbed of a great role. I think he could have definitely pulled it off after seeing him in American Me. But let me get back. They found out about the Genesis device and they want to use it, not knowing that that was the only one that the Federation had. Now, Savik from the second movie, now played by Robin Curtis, after Kirstie Alley foolishly gave them a figure that they were not willing to pay for that one actress. Robin Curtis took her part, and she did very, very well. She appears briefly in Part 4 also. Now, she goes with David to explore the life form on the Genesis planet, and it is Captain Spock. Klingons beam down, and now they have their hostages after destroying the USS Grissom accidentally. Well, when the Enterprise arrives, they engage the Klingons, and it's badly bruised, so they surrender. But not before they put the self-destruct sequence on. So what ends up happening is, boom, it happens. Now, prior to this, Kirk's son David, which we find out in the second movie, was killed by a Klingon. Robin Curtis Savik says basically David is dead, and Will Shatner's character goes right back into a chair. "You Klingon bastard! You killed my son!" And it was such a powerful thing, and powerful moment in the film. So so we find that out. He's killed by a Klingon. Kirk, Scotty, McCoy, and Sulu watch Enterprise spiral in the sky after the self-destruct sequence is given, and Kirk is like, "My God, Bones, what have I done?" Bones is saying, "What you had to." After a while, the rest of the crew is being beamed upon the Klingon vessel, and Kirk after they're beamed upon the Klingon vessel, Kirk, Cruz, and a young Spock are left on the planet, and Kirk is triumphant, obviously, but the battle is so funny the way it goes, or at least the way it ends. So Kirk is triumphant and shouts in Klingon, "Muds! And obviously the Klingons are the Russians in the thing, so they had to make it like a Russian-esque. So the Klingon vessel has been taken over prior to Kirk and Cruz's fight, and they go to Vulcan to reunite Spock with his Katra. Leonard Nimoy's first lines as Spock in this movie is, "Jim, your name is Jim." Yes. And there's a reunion with everybody, and now we move on to Part 4. Now, this is my favorite Star Trek movie because it's still, even if it weren't Star Trek, it still would have been enjoyable. In the beginning scene, everyone votes to go back home, and the ragtag crew dubs their new ship the Bounty as they mutinize against Starfleet in order to go to Genesis. However, the USS Saratoga, the next scene, the USS Saratoga, captained wonderfully by a lovely actress, rest in peace, Mae Sinclair, they come across a probe that is aiming their signal at Earth's oceans, and they broadcast hello in all known languages, but they can't communicate with it as their systems are going down as soon as they're within range. Sarek says, "It is hard to answer when you do not understand the question." The president of the Federation has an emergency broadcast and says, "Avoid Earth at all costs. This probe is aiming their frequency at the world's oceans." And Spock, Kirk, and McCoy try to decipher what they're being told. Now, McCoy says after a while, "So you think that's their way of saying hello there to the people of the Earth?" And to which Spock's reply, and it's brilliant, "Whoever wrote this is awesome. There are many forms of intelligence on Earth. Only human arrogance would assume that the message must be for man." Favorite line, hands down. Now, after playing the frequency back underwater in a simulation, they determine it to be whale song, and Spock says, if I'm correct, there cannot be a reply to there cannot be a reply to this frequency. So what they do, what did they have to do? They have to slingshot around the Earth and go back to our time, which is 1986 in the when the film was released. So they go back to contemporary America, and Chekhov and Uhura are tasked with finding more nuclear power for the ship so that they can make it back to their time. Sulu must find a helicopter to lift these plexiglasses for Scotty, who must take find glass thick enough to actually hold all of the pressure that the whales and the water, so that they can take them down into to the ocean, so that they can communicate with the whales that Kirk and Spock must find. Whew, that's a lot, right? So as they go and do their Mission Impossible thing, Kirk befriends a whale biologist at a cetacean institute, played very well and ably by Catherine Hicks, who played the mother in Child's Play 1 and Seventh Heaven as the pastor's wife. So Scotty finds after Spock swims with the whales at the Cetacean Institute, he finds out that Gracie is pregnant, and now that they have the whales, the rest of the crew must be pieced together. Scotty finds a place where he can get 1-inch thick plexiglass that will hold the pressure whales and the water. Chekhov is taken prisoner and hits his head trying to escape, and is taken to a hospital and escapes with the help of Kirk, McCoy, and Jillian, who later goes back to the 23rd century because she's the only one who knows about whales. Now, Chekhov's escape scene is pretty cool because he is a Russian, and at this time, Russians and the U.S. are not all keen with each other. So that scene plays out pretty well. You've got to see it in order to appreciate its fullness. So I like how prior to going back to their time, the crew, cloaked in the bird of prey, find out that whales are closing in on George and Gracie. I like how they put the danger of whaling into the movie without laying it on too thick, but you still leave it in your mind. So back in their time, the crew crashes into San Francisco, and Kirk goes into the bird of prey as it is sinking, and he must get the whales out or they're going to drown. Now, whales are mammals needing air to breathe. It's easy to forget that. But the rescue was successful, and the whales communicate with the probe. Disaster averted. However, the danger is not quite over yet, as Kirk and company stand trial. Spock is not charged, but he stands with his comrades, and one sole count remains after all charges are read: disobeying of Starfleet's command, and because of that, he is demoted from admiral to captain, which is what Kirk was meant to do. And actually, in part 2, Spock says, accepting promotion was quite foolish of you. Basically saying you were born to lead and command a starship. Now, Star Trek V was Bill Shatner's dream. It was not quite my favorite, but it was still decent for Star Trek. It was 1 and 5 were the worst Star Treks comparatively, but I like how they strung together 2, 3, and 4. But now part 6 is the last and is an amazing send-off, so I'll get right into it. Star Trek VI, as Praxis explodes, which is Klingons' version of Chernobyl, the Excelsior, now commanded by Captain Sulu, tries to help, but to do so would be considered an act of war, so they back off. Sometimes later, the Klingons realize that in order to make peace, they must reach out to the Federation, and Spock has the man for the job, Captain Kirk. Now, Captain Kirk doesn't think he can trust Klingons because they killed his son in the third one, but he will do what he needs to do. While escorting the diplomat, Enterprise fires, and chaos reigns because there's no way that she should have fired. Now, the shot disables the gravity on the Klingons' vessel, and many important Klingons are killed, including the ambassador that they were there to escort. Kirk and McCoy try to mitigate the damage and try to save the ambassador, but to no avail. And the ambassador dies, and Kirk and McCoy are charged with the murder of all Klingons on board. They're defended by Worf of the Next Generation. As the crew tried to gather evidence of McCoy and Kirk's innocence, Lieutenant Valeris, Spock's protege, try to find out what they need to prove to find the shooters. Now, Lieutenant Valeris was supposed to be Savick, but I'll explain why it couldn't be Savick later. What happens is they find the anti-gravity boots used in the attack, and the two men are later killed, but the crew fools the killer into believing that they're dead. When the killer goes to sickbay to kill them, they discover Spock. Valeris discovers Spock. Saavik would never have been able to betray the Federation, so they made a new character that would be able to do so. Saavik would have been way too like by the book to have done such an unimaginable thing. So now, as Kirk and McCoy are in prison, after having been convicted of murder and made to work the rest of their natural lives in a terrible place, which is comparable to their Siberia, they meet a shapeshifter who makes a play to escort Kirk and McCoy out so that they can both be killed while escaping, after revealing that she will receive a full pardon. That's played by Grace Jones. Kirk and the Changeling fight, and after some quick thinking, they vaporize the false Kirk. Kirk says, "Not me, you idiot, him!" And only to see Kirk and McCoy beamed out before they could kill him. Now, information gleaned from Valeris and piecing together other information available, they find out that at a conference there will be an assassination attempt. They have to get there in time. They foil it and discover a man dressed as a Klingon in order to keep the fight going, or actually to make it seem like an inside job. Now, when the shooter is shot and the blood is red, they find out, of course, that's not Klingon blood. A Romulan, a Starfleet officer, and a captain, a high-ranking captain from the third movie, I believe, that played the captain of the Excelsior, dressed up as the Klingon in order to kill the current ambassador. And actually, the ambassador that they were there to escort was actually the Chancellor. I made that mistake. Now, what ends up so that happens there. But prior to that, getting to the conference, a Klingon bird of prey is firing on the Enterprise, and she's taken a beating. Now, they find out that through Valeris that there is a bird of prey that can fire when cloaked, and that's how they find out that the Enterprise fired. It wasn't exactly their ship that fired, but even though the two torpedoes were missing, which that was never resolved, of course, but they find out that the bird of prey fired while cloaked, and that's how it all happened, and they thought that it was the Enterprise. So, the attempt having been foiled, Starfleet and Klingon and the Romulan co-conspirators now exposed, peace now being a chance, and change being embraced by Captain Kirk and Madam Chancellor, the daughter of the deceased Chancellor. He explains, Kirk, that some of them were afraid of the change, thinking that the future would be the end of history. Madam Chancellor says to Kirk, "You've restored my father's faith." And Kirk replies, "You've restored my son's." While all of the conspirators sit there ashamed, applause rings out, and peace is finally seen for what it is, a lasting peace. At the end of the movie, the Enterprise is to be decommissioned and gone on to the scrapyard. Uhura receives a message saying they are to report to the shipyard for immediate decommission. And Spock says, if I were human, I believe my response would be to go to hell. If I were human. Then off to the second star on the right after a wonderful voiceover by Captain Kirk and the signatures of the main cast playing over the outro. Now, this movie is an amazing send-off, and you have to see the full franchise, at least skip 1 and 5, to appreciate all of the wonderful moments in this franchise. Especially another one of my favorite moments in the fourth one is when Spock and Sarek are there, and he says, "What do you want me to tell your mother?" "Tell Mother that I am fine." But also in the beginning of Star Trek IV, Spock is handling some questions, and the computer knows that he is half human. And Jane Wyatt, who, oh my goodness, rest in peace, Mark Leonard and Jane Wyatt, she tells him, "You logically believe that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one. But you are here by a mistake, because they believed and put their whole careers on the line, believing that the needs of the few, of the one, outweigh the needs of the many." And which leads into that moment at the end in Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home. So Wrath of Khan, Search for Spock, Voyage Home, the next, The Undiscovered Country, because it actually takes a reference from Hamlet. But you've got to see the dinner scene in Star Trek 6 to appreciate a lot of what actually happens at the end of the movie. So for all my Star Trek fellow fans, thank you for hopefully sticking to the end of the video. As I said in the beginning, it was going to be a long video. I hope you enjoy. Let me know some of your favorite moments from the Star Trek films 2, 3, 4, and 6. Have a great day, YouTube. Bye-bye.